Hello, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the important issues appearing in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 11th November 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So, let's start our today's discussion. Now, from today, we shall be discussing various questions which has appeared in the mains examination of 2019 and the corresponding topics which we have covered in Daily News Simplified videos, in Focus magazine, as well as in Mains Compass 2019. So today we'll be taking up this particular question which appeared in GS paper 2 in 2019. The question says, the Central Administrative Tribunal which was established for redressal of grievances and complaints by or against central government employees nowadays is exercising its powers as an independent judicial authority. Explain. Now, this question was of 10 marks, and you were supposed to write this particular answer in 150 words. Now, Central Administrative Tribunal was in news because of backlog with respect to vacancies. In this aspect, even the Parliamentary Standing Committee has gave certain recommendations to clear the backlog in the Central Administrative Tribunal. So, in the backdrop of this news appearing, this question was asked by UPSC in GS paper 2. Now this news was covered in DNS, in Focus magazine, as well as in Mains Compass for Polity and Governance. So first of all, let's go through whatever we have covered with respect to Central Administrative Tribunal, and then we'll try to frame a possible answer structure for this particular question on Central Administrative Tribunal. Now, as you can see, this DNS video dated 7th January 2019 covered this particular news relating to CAT backlog mounts as post vacant. This news covered not only about the Central Administrative Tribunal but also covered the act under which Central Administrative Tribunal is constituted. The act is the Administrative Tribunals Act of 1985. So we understand that Central Administrative Tribunal is a statutory body, and this point was specifically highlighted in this particular DNS video. Further, a practice question was also given, however, with respect to prelims examination, asking that which of the following is our statutory body, that is a body framed by enactment of law. So the options given were Central Administrative Tribunal, Staff Selection Commission, and Union Public Service Commission. Now it's important to note that even the Staff Selection Commission was in news because there was a suggestion with respect to making Staff Selection Commission also a statutory body. So in this, the correct answer was 1 only. So we see that in the DNS, we not only covered about the Administrative Tribunals Act, stating that the Parliament has enacted this act which provides for establishment of Central Administrative Tribunal, State Administrative Tribunal, and a Joint Administrative Tribunal. Further, it mentioned that the Central Administrative Tribunal shall consist of a chairman and such number of judicial administrative members as decided by the central government. Further, it states that the chairman and every other member of the Central Administrative Tribunal shall be appointed after consultation with the Chief Justice of India by the President. It further highlights that the Central Administrative Tribunal shall exercise jurisdiction, powers, and authority in relation to recruitment, matters concerning recruitment to any All India service or to any civil service of the Union or a civil post under the Union or to a post connected with defence or in the defence services. So the Administrative Tribunals Act of 1985 defines the jurisdiction, powers, as well as authority of the central and state administrative tribunals. Further, this topic was also covered in Focus magazine in the month of February 2019. As already mentioned, this news was with respect to a report of Parliamentary Standing Committee, where it stated that the Parliamentary Standing Committee in its report has stated that even after 30 years of establishment of Central Administrative Tribunal, it lacks human and physical infrastructure. And this lack of physical and human infrastructure is leading to number of vacancies. and because of the vacancies, backlog of cases in the tribunal is increasing. So, in this aspect, the Parliamentary Standing Committee made the following recommendations. First, to fill the vacancies at CAT in strict timelines. Second, starting of appointment process of tribunal members in advance. And third, the government should examine the reasons for members leaving service prematurely and taking remedial measures. Next, ensuring that infrastructural work does not get delayed due to procedural hurdles. So, the committee report also highlighted the importance of infrastructural work and mentioned that such infrastructural necessities must not get delayed because of procedural hurdles. Further, the committee also recommended that the Department of Personnel and Training and Central Administrative Tribunal should jointly work out any difficulties with respect to proper functioning of the tribunal. So, because of the backlog of cases as well as the report or recommendation of Parliamentary Standing Committee, the Central Administrative Tribunal was in news around January-February of 2019, and accordingly a question was asked by UPSC in the mains examination. Now, the Compass magazine for Polity and Governance on page number 95 and 96 mentioned about significance of administrative tribunals as well as the recommendation of Law Commission of India with respect to the working of tribunals. Here it specifically highlighted that most of these tribunals or authorities are a kind of court performing functions which are judicial as well as quasi-judicial in nature and have the trappings of a court. Further, with respect to uniformity in the appointment system, it says that since the tribunals are entrusted with the duty of adjudicating the cases involving legal questions and nuances of law, adherence to principles of natural justice will enhance the public confidence in their working. Further, the judicial member must be a person possessing a degree in law and must have a judicially trained mind and experience in performing judicial functions. So, the objective of having uniformity in the appointment system can be achieved if the appointments are made to the respective posts as are indicated below. First, a person is or has been a Supreme Court judge or a Chief Justice of the High Court as chairman. Second, a person who has been a judge of a High Court as vice chairman, and a person who has been a High Court judge or an advocate who is eligible to be appointed as a judge of High Court as judicial member. Now, we have already seen that the administrative tribunal has administrative members as well as judicial members. Now, as per the Act, to become a part of administrative members, the person concerned must have held the post of secretary for 2 years or for the post of additional secretary for 5 years under the Government of India. And with respect to judicial members, the Act states that the judicial member must be qualified as that of a judge of a high court, or he must have held the post of secretary under the Department of Legal Affairs or under Legislative Department of Ministry of Law and Justice for last 2 years, or he must be an additional secretary under Department of Legal Affairs or Legislative Departments for the last 5 years. So, going by the recommendation of Law Commission, we can say that the Administrative Tribunals Act has provided certain criteria for the post of administrative members and also for judicial members. Now, another significant aspect mentioned in Compass magazine was with respect to vacancy, the point on which even the Parliamentary Standing Committee gave its recommendations. Further, the Compass magazine also highlighted various recommendations of Law Commission with respect to transfer of judges, with respect to uniformity in appointment, with respect to a selection board or a committee, with respect to appointment of members, certain recommendations with respect to the appointment of chairperson or who shall be the chairperson, as well as administrative members, about the presence of expert or technical members in the committee. Further, it also highlighted about the terms and conditions of service as well as other allowances with respect to the appointment. And lastly, it mentioned about the tenure for members of such tribunals. So these recommendations in a way not only establish the independent functioning of the tribunal but also becomes a gist of our answer writing process. So after understanding the reasons for why this question was asked, let us go through this question in order to understand that what should have been written in this particular question. So the question says that Central Administrative Tribunal, which was established for redressal of grievances and complaints by or against central government employees nowadays is exercising its powers as an independent judicial authority. Explain. Now, 3 to 4 important words needs to be understood with respect to this particular question. First of all is with respect to the establishment of Central Administrative Tribunal with respect to redressal grievances and complaints by or against central government employees. And then it is talking about that this institution is exercising its powers as an independent judicial authority. So in this question, you had to explain that nowadays CAT is exercising its powers as an independent judicial authority. So the first question is that is CAT really an independent judicial authority? Or when can a tribunal be said to be an independent judicial authority? So if a tribunal is constituted as per law and its functions, powers, jurisdictions have been defined, including the appointment and removal process of its members and their salaries, then we can say that such a tribunal is independent with respect to its functions. So we have to see whether the creation of CAT is specified through law along with their composition. Second, we have to see that the salaries and allowances given to the members, including chairman and vice chairman, are they subject to any disadvantage or disvariance? That is, does the law fix their salary and can the executive change their salary as per their discretion? Next is with respect to their jurisdiction, powers, as well as authority. That is, does the law defines or describes their sphere of influence where they are allowed or permitted to take certain cases. So it says that such jurisdiction, powers, and authority of the tribunal must be clearly specified. Next is with respect to power to punish for contempt of court proceedings. Further, whether the proceedings before the tribunal is a judicial proceeding. And then, is there any limitation period with respect to filing cases or appeal even to higher judicial authorities? So these are the points which highlights the independent nature of any judicial authority, including tribunals. So after understanding these points, let's go through the important points of Administrative Tribunals Act 1985 so as to understand that whether nowadays CAT is exercising its powers as an independent judicial authority. So with respect to proving that CAT is an independent judicial authority, we must start or introduce the answer by stating that Parliament has enacted the Administrative Tribunals Act 1985, and this provides for the establishment of Central Administrative Tribunal, State Administrative Tribunal, and also a Joint Administrative Tribunal. So this basically explains that CAT has its establishment under an Act of the Parliament, that is Administrative Tribunals Act 1985, and this act was legislated after the Constitution 42nd Amendment Act, which provided for Article 323A of the Indian Constitution, whereby it mentioned that Parliament may by law constitute or create a tribunal. Now let's go through the wordings of the Act itself in order to understand its aims, objectives, and purpose. It says that the Administrative Tribunals Act 1985 shall provide for the adjudication or trial by administrative tribunals of disputes and complaints with respect to recruitment and conditions of service of persons appointed to public services and posts in connection with the affairs of the union or of any state or of local or other authority within the territory of India or under the control of the government of India or of any corporation or society owned or controlled by Government of India in pursuance of Article 323A of the Indian Constitution. Thus, this Act not only provides for aims and objectives and purpose, but also fixes the jurisdiction of this particular Act. That is, this Act shall operate with respect to recruitment and conditions of service of persons appointed to public services and post in connection with the affairs of the Union, any state, local authority, or any corporation or society owned or controlled by the Government of India or of any state. and this particular part was also highlighted in the Focus magazine, including the mentioning of 47 Amendment as well as about Article 323A. It says that pursuant to Article 323A, the Parliament has enacted the Administrative Tribunals Act 1985, and this provides for establishment of Central Administrative Tribunal, State Administrative Tribunal, and Joint Administrative Tribunal. Further, these joint administrative tribunals can also be constituted for two or more states. Now, the Focus magazine also covered certain aspects with respect to composition as well as tenure of its members or officers. It says that Central Administrative Tribunal shall consist of a chairman and such number of judicial and administrative members as decided by the central government. So, point to be noted is that it has two type of members. One is administrative members and the other is judicial members. And both these different type of members have been fixed by the law. Now it further highlights about the appointment process of the chairman with respect to Central Administrative Tribunal as well as State Administrative Tribunals. Now next, the Act also fixes the tenure of the chairman. It says that the chairman shall hold office for a term of 5 years from the date on which he enters upon his office. It further mentions that the chairman shall not hold office after he has attained the age of 68 years. So, it fixes tenure either with respect to 5 years as chairman or shall not hold office after attaining the age of 68 years. It further mentions that no member shall hold office after they have attained the age of 65 years. So, for the chairman, it is 68 years and for other member, it is 65 years. So, the Administrative Tribunals Act here also fixes their tenure. That is, the central government by their own discretion cannot change their tenure as per their choice. And if the government wishes to change the tenure or composition of the administrative tribunals, both at center and state level, then an amendment has to be made in the Administrative Tribunals Act. So we can say that fixing of tenure as well as composition of central and state administrative tribunal in a way also give these members an independence in their working process. So the term of office of chairman has already been fixed, and with respect to their salaries and allowances, it says that the salaries and allowances of the chairman and other members of the administrative tribunal shall be as such as may be prescribed by the central government. It further highlights that neither their salary nor their allowances nor other term of conditions of service of the chairman or other members of the administrative tribunal shall be varied to their disadvantage after their appointment. So, with respect to salaries, allowances, and even other terms and conditions of service of the members, including chairman, we can say that they have independence as well as security with respect to their job. So, the Administrative Tribunals Act clearly specifies and fixes their jurisdiction, powers, as well as authority of the tribunal. And it also mentions that the salaries and allowances of the members, including chairman, shall not be varied to their disadvantage. It further highlights that the tribunal shall, for the purpose of discharging their functions under this act, has the same powers as are vested in civil court under the Code of Civil Procedure while trying a suit, that is, while trying a case. And the tribunal shall also have the following powers: with respect to summoning and enforcing the attendance of any person and examining them on oath, requiring the discovery and production of documents, receiving evidence on affidavits, issuing commissions for the examination of witness or documents, reviewing its own decisions, dismissing a representation for default or deciding it ex parte. Now, ex parte here means without the other side. It has the power to set aside any order of dismissal of any representation for default or any order passed by it ex parte and any other matter which may be prescribed by the central government. So the Act clearly defines certain judicial powers and functions for the administrative tribunals. The Act further highlights that the tribunal shall not be bound by the procedure laid down in Code of Civil Procedure but shall be guided by the principles of natural justice. So, it is not necessary for the tribunal to go according to the Code of Civil Procedure every time, and it can also follow the principles of natural justice. Now, two another important points in this Act is that proceedings before a tribunal shall be judicial proceedings. So whatever proceedings takes place before the administrative tribunal, that is both central and state, including joint, all these proceedings before the tribunal shall be deemed to be a judicial proceedings, and the members and staff of the tribunal shall be public servants, that is the chairman and other members, and the officers and other employees of the tribunal shall be deemed to be public servants. So, by going through all these provisions of the Act, we can say that the tribunal is truly independent in its functioning and performs judicial functions, as it has been clearly stated that proceedings before the tribunal shall be judicial proceedings. Apart from this, you must also highlight about the concept of judicial review with respect to the decisions of Central Administrative Tribunal, State Administrative Tribunal, or Joint Administrative Tribunal. So, the decisions of the tribunal are not sacrosanct and can be appealed against. So, any appeals against the decision of the tribunal shall lie before the division bench of the High Court and not directly to the Supreme Court under Article 136 of the Indian Constitution, that is under special leave petition of Supreme Court of India. Now UPSC has asked a question on Article 142 of the Indian Constitution with respect to powers of Supreme Court to do complete justice within the territory of India. In this aspect, you must also know about Article 136 of the Indian Constitution, which talks about special leave petition. So with respect to your answers, these points becomes important. However, there is always certain gap between theory and practice. It means that whatever has been prescribed in law, it becomes extremely difficult to apply those theories in real practices. So in this aspect, you can conclude by saying that the government must take appropriate steps to ensure the independent judicial functioning of the central administrative tribunals. Further, the government must also look into the issues of backlog and infrastructural constraints which the tribunal is currently facing in its various benches. So these are the aspects which you can highlight in your answer with respect to this particular question. Now in our PDF, we have also given you a model answer structure with respect to this particular question. So after this discussion, let's move on to our news analysis for the day. Now the first news for today's discussion appears on page number 10 in the editorial section. It says, Peace and Justice. In paving the way for a Ram temple in Ayodhya, the Supreme Court prioritized communal harmony over all else. Now the entire issue of Ayodhya verdict and the concept of Indian secularism has been discussed in the DNS video dated 10th November 2019 by Arun sir. So in this particular analysis, we'll discuss the positives as well as negatives of this judgment as highlighted in this editorial. So this editorial discusses some of the key elements of Ayodhya verdict and concludes that even though the verdict is good in its nature with respect to preserving social harmony, however, it is still fraught with some unaddressed issues. So this topic becomes important from a mains perspective and becomes a part of GS paper 1 as well as GS paper 2. Under GS 1, it gets covered under social empowerment, communalism, regionalism and secularism. Whereas under GS paper 2, it becomes a part of basic structure of the Indian Constitution with respect to the concept of secularism. Now this editorial highlights three positives with respect to this judgment. The first point highlighted is with respect to social harmony. The editorial highlights the part of the verdict where it says that a trust has to be formed by the center with respect to the management of the temple. So this editorial mentions that allocation of title to a trust to be formed by center and not to Hindu plaintiffs is a good sign for social harmony, as the judgment shall not be taken either as a sign of victory or as a sign of defeat by any community. The second point highlighted is with respect to a unanimous judgment. That is, there is no dissenting opinion by any of the 5 judges. Now, the unanimity of the decision in the bench reflects the intention of the judiciary to end the dispute completely, which has been a divisive issue for the country so far. So, this unanimous judgment will further help in strengthening the social harmony in the society. Further, the editorial highlights that the court has done well in unequivocally condemning the incidents of desecration of the mosque in 1949 as well as its demolition in 1992. So, condemning this wrongful act by the judiciary will also send a positive signal with respect to social harmony in the society. Now, with respect to negatives, this editorial has highlighted about the fact of lack of recognition of religious rights of Muslims. Now, the editorial says that while the Supreme Court has recognized the wrong inflicted upon the Muslim community and granted compensation by way of allotting an alternate land of 5 acres, this is more of a moral compensation rather than recognition of their religious rights. Now, this statement has been mentioned in the editorial because of the fact that the court observed that namaz was being offered between 1857 and 1949, but in this regard offers no relief of restoring the religious faith of Muslims. Now, this editorial highlights another negative, that is, the judgment is not in line with the principle adopted. The editorial says that the court clearly spells out that civil suits like title dispute shall be adjudicated only on the basis of evidence. However, this particular award, as per the Supreme Court, was based on the principle of balance of probabilities. So, the editorial questions if the principle of probability can be invoked while excluding the right of one particular party. So, these are the negatives which has been highlighted in this particular editorial with respect to the Ayodhya verdict. Nevertheless, the lacuna in the judgment, the editorial does concede or does say that the judgment has done well in putting a closure to the dispute, which has created a lot of animosity between members of both religious communities. However, for complete justice, the court must convict all those who conspired and executed the demolition of Babri Mosque in 1992. So, this is what has been highlighted in this particular editorial. So, this editorial must be read from the perspective of GS paper 1 as well as GS paper 2. The next news appears in the article section on page number 11. It says renovate, not rebuild. The features of Parliament House demonstrate the secular nature of the Republic. Now, from your mains point of view, this topic becomes a part of GS paper 1 with respect to Indian culture, salient aspect of art forms, and architecture from ancient to modern times. And from your prelims perspective, this topic forms a part of history of India. Now, this article highlights that the government of India is considering either to redevelop or renovate the Parliament of India or to build a new structure for the Indian Parliament on the eve of 75th anniversary of our independence in the year 2022. So, this article deliberates on the issues to be considered by the government while taking this decision, either with respect to renovation of Indian Parliament or with respect to building a new structure for the Indian Parliament. So, in this background, this article mentions certain needs for renovation or construction of Indian Parliament. Let us go through these various requirements as highlighted in this particular article. So, this editorial highlights certain needs for the renovation or construction of Indian Parliament from the aspects of security, shortages of space, reasons for choosing renovation over new construction, style, as well as content. Let us go through each of these particular reasons as provided in this article. Now, with respect to security, it mentions that the current Parliament House is not earthquake resistant and Delhi falls under seismic zone 4. With respect to shortage of space, it says that there is shortage of working as well as parking space, and also there are shortages with respect to various amenities and services which is provided in the Parliament. Further, there are no chambers for individual member of Parliament, and this situation will further worsen when there is an increase in the number of seats, especially after the delimitation done in 2026. Now, about the Indian Parliament, it says that the Parliament of India represents the pluralistic nature of Indian society in its architecture, and it was designed by British architects Sir Edwin Lutyens and Sir Herbert Baker in the year 1912 to 1913. And the architecture of Indian Parliament is plural in both style as well as content. With respect to style, the article highlights that the Indian Parliament is a hybrid of Indo-Saracenic and Roman architecture. Now, here Indo-Saracenic refers to elements of both Islamic and Hindu architectural style. Now, the Parliament of India has a circular design and this is said to be inspired from a 11th century Chausath Yogini temple which is in Morena district of Madhya Pradesh. As you can see in this picture, this is the Chausath Yogini temple in Morena district of Madhya Pradesh. Now, with respect to contents, this article says that the inscriptions mentioned on the Indian Parliament has been taken from Upanishads, Mahabharat, Manusmriti, Quran, etc. And besides this, the Parliament also has become a part of collective conscience of Indians. So these are certain aspects with respect to the Indian Parliament. And there is a need for renovation or construction of the Indian Parliament because for security reason and also because for shortage of space. Now this bronze statue of Chandragupta Maurya is installed outside the gate number 5 of Indian Parliament. The platform to the statue says, Shepherd boy Chandragupta Maurya dreaming of the India he was to create. And accordingly, a website on Raj Sabha mentions that in the courtyard opposite gate number 5 of Parliament House, on a red sandstone pedestal, has been installed a symbolic bronze statue of Chandragupta Maurya, one of the greatest figures in Indian history and founder of the Mauryan dynasty, who reigned from 321 BC to 296 BC. This 0.74 meter high bust bears at its base inscription Shepherd boy Chandragupta Maurya, dreaming of India he was to create. And this bust was made by Hilda Seligman, who also donated this particular statue for installation in Parliament complex. So this article concludes by saying that architectural pluralism of the Indian Parliament must be maintained, whether the government of India decides to renovate or redevelop the Indian Parliament, or whether the government of India decides to build a new structure for the Indian Parliament. So this article must be understood from the perspective of Indian Parliament and its various art forms. Hence, this topic becomes a part of Indian history as well as GS paper 1. The next news appears on page number 10 in the article section. It says, after RCEP reticence, need for reform, recalibration. India needs to prepare for the next round of structural reforms to join global value chains and unleash manufacturing. Now, with respect to India not joining RCEP, the author in this article has not only highlighted certain concerns in this backdrop that why India has not joined RCEP, but has also mentioned that India should be a part of RCEP in order to integrate in the global economy chain. So, this topic of RCEP becomes important from your prelims perspective with respect to economic development, and with respect to mains, it gets covered under GS paper 3, specifically with respect to Indian economy. Now, with respect to not joining RCEP, the Prime Minister of India highlighted that the key concerns of India was not addressed at the RCEP meeting, and he said that there will be no compromise on core interest of India. And one of the core interest of India is with respect to the farmers as well as small business owners of India. Another core concern which was not addressed at the RCEP meeting with respect to India was about work visas and liberalization in services with respect to Indians. So this was also another important aspect which was not addressed at the RCEP meeting. Another point of concern was with respect to the chapter on e-commerce as well as issues relating to data localization. And the final and the most important aspect was with respect to India's trade deficit, as India feared expansion of trade deficit under the RCEP agreement. And this concern with respect to India's trade deficit is particularly acute with respect to China, as India also fears an influx of cheap Chinese imports into India, especially after the RCEP agreement. So, primarily, these were the major concerns, as also reflected by the statement of Prime Minister of India on not joining the RCEP. However, this article mentions that despite these concerns, there are enough and sufficient reasons that India should be a part of RCEP. So let's go through these different points as highlighted in this particular article as to why India should be a part of RCEP. Now, this article mentions that India has enormous strategic and long term economic imperatives to join the RCEP. Now, it is India's ambition to become a global hub for manufacturing, And this means that it is in the country's long term national interest to get integrated into the global value chains of the world. So, this article mentions that in order to boost manufacturing and also to get integrated into the global value chains, India should have joined RCEP. Further, this article highlights that India is not part of two important economic structures of Asia Pacific, that is RCEP as well as CPTPP, that is Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans Pacific Partnership. Now, the author believes that India should be a part of both these economic structures because these will effectively determine the global value chains for manufacturing in Asia for years to come. So, this article says that since India is neither a member of RCEP or CPTPP, so India will remain unintegrated in such supply chains of the world, and its ambition to become a global manufacturing hub will be further delayed. And this delay in integration with the global value chain will further impact India's internal and external ambitions. Now, both World Bank and India's own statistics reveal that integrating with the global value chain will not only boost growth, create better jobs, but will also reduce poverty in India. So, the World Bank has found that domestic reforms, along with joining global value chain, can not only boost growth, create better jobs, and also will help in reducing poverty in India. Further, India's own evidence shows that jobs linked to global value chains earn one third more than those jobs focused on domestic market. So this article highlights that inability of India to become part of RCP means that India will lose out on key opportunity to create high quality and high paying jobs, as it is evident that the global value chains of the world creates and sustain a high paid jobs. Moreover, India's absence in both of Asia's two key economic architectures will take away from India's goals as a regional and Indo Pacific power, as well as a prospective global power. So, this article effectively mentions that India must find a way to solve its various concerns with respect to RCEP and must also plan to join CPTPP, that is, Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans Pacific Partnership. Now, this particular question on Trans Pacific Partnership was asked in the prelims of 2016. The question was, with reference to the Trans Pacific Partnership, consider the following statements. First, it is an agreement among all the Pacific Rim countries except China and Russia. No, this statement is incorrect. As you can see, it says that impetus of what became Trans-Pacific Partnership was a 2005 trade agreement. And this trade agreement was between a small group of Pacific Rim countries comprising Brunei, Chile, New Zealand, and Singapore. However, in 2008, President George Bush announced that the United States would begin trade talks with this group, and this led Australia, Vietnam, and Peru to join TPP. Further, as the talks proceeded, this group expanded to further include Canada, Japan, Malaysia, as well as Mexico. So, overall, it had 12 countries. However, this deal was never ratified by the US Congress because it became an issue of target both with respect to the Republicans as well as Democrats. So ultimately, when Donald Trump became the president, he formally withdrew from the Trans Pacific Partnership on his first full day in office, that is in January 2017. So, after understanding about Trans Pacific Partnership, we know that the first statement is incorrect. Second, it is a strategic alliance for the purpose of maritime security only. No, this is again incorrect as it is to boost free trade among these 11 countries. So the question was which of the statements given above is are correct. Here the correct answer was D, that is neither one nor two. The next news appears page number 9. It says Center gets responses to draft social security code. The government had asked for public suggestions. Now recently the union government has proposed the draft social security code. The draft code has been formulated in order to merge 8 existing laws related to social security of workers. Further, the draft code has also proposed several new initiatives, including universal social security for unorganized sector workers, an insurance and health benefit for workers employed in gig economy. Now, gig economy here refers to a labor market which has short term contract works as well as a labor market having more of freelance work rather than a permanent job. So, presently, the Union government has circulated a draft in order to take opinion from various stakeholders. Now, this particular article highlights that the RSS affiliated Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, which is India's largest trade union, has also expressed certain concerns with respect to the draft code. Now, in your prelims examination, this topic gets covered under economic and social development, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 3, specifically with respect to Indian economy and various issues associated with it. Further, this topic also gets covered under GS paper 2, specifically with respect to welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections of the society. So, in this analysis, let us understand that what is the need to have a Social Security Code of 2019 and certain important provisions of the draft Social Security Code. So, in the pursuance of merging different social security laws, the Government of India has come up with a draft Social Security Code of 2019. So, in this aspect, the government has decided to formulate a comprehensive code relating to social security. And in this aspect, it says that the objective of this code is to provide a legislative backup and an administrative structure for right based universal basic social security to the entire workforce in the country. So, in this backdrop, this particular code aims to achieve the following objectives. First, it aims to provide universal social security, including pension, sickness benefit, maternity benefit, disablement benefit, and various other kinds of benefits to the workers. Further, it aims to cover all kinds of employment, including part time workers, casual workers, fixed term workers, domestic workers, etc. And lastly, it aims to merge, simplify, rationalize, and also consolidate the fragmented labor legislations as well as different schemes on social security. And this amalgamation or merging of these different codes will further make these laws less complex and easier to implement. And effectively, it will provide a sense of comprehensiveness and easily enforceability of such social security laws. Now, the important provisions with respect to draft social security code has also been provided in your PDF. So what you can do is also to go through the PDF as provided with this particular description. So the most important aspect are first, as already mentioned, rationalization and amalgamation of laws. In this, it highlights that the Code on Social Security 2019 will merge 8 different existing labor laws, and this includes Employees Compensation Act 1923, Employees State Insurance Act 1948, Employees Provident Funds and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952, Maternity Benefit Act 1961, Payment of Gratuity Act 1972, Cine Workers Welfare Fund Act 1981, Building and Other Construction Workers Cess Act 1996, and Unorganized Workers Social Security Act of 2008. Further, it aims to establish a social security board for the unorganized workers. And this board shall be established both at the national level as well as the state level. Further, the code provides for an advisory committee. It says that it aims to set up an advisory committee at national level as well as at state level. And this committee will work for the benefit of the unorganized workers, and its mandate would be to advise the central and state governments upon such matters which may arise out of various issues of administration of this particular code relating to the unorganized workers. Further, with respect to corporatization of EPFO and ESIC. Now, EPFO stands for Employees Provident Fund Organization and ESIC stands for Employees State Insurance Corporation. So both these corporation becomes important because the draft code aims for corporatization of both these corporation and organization. Further, the draft code also aims to provide for a social security cover for the unorganized sector employees. And this social security cover shall include issues or matter relating to life and disability cover, health and maternity benefits, old age protection, and any other benefit which may be determined by the central government. Further, it highlights about benefits to the gig workers in the economy. Now, as already mentioned, gig workers are those who work for short-term contract or who work on a freelance basis. Basically, those who do not have a permanent job. So, in this regard, the central government plans to formulate suitable social security schemes for the benefit of gig economy workers. Further, the code also plans for maternity benefit, employee compensation, and imposition of building and other construction workers' welfare cess. It highlights that every woman shall be entitled to the payment of maternity benefit at the rate of the average daily wage for the period of her actual absence. And it further highlights that no employer shall knowingly employ a woman in any establishment during the 6 weeks immediately following the day of her delivery, or her miscarriage, or her medical termination of pregnancy. So, this is an important aspect with respect to maternity benefit. Now, with respect to employee compensation, it says that if personal injury is caused to an employee by accident or an occupational disease arising out of in course of his employment, which is mentioned in the third schedule, then his employer shall be liable to pay compensation as per the provision of this code. So, it talks about a compensation which has to be paid by the employer to the employee. Now, with respect to imposition of building and other construction workers' welfare cess, it says that there shall be levied and collected a cess for the purpose of social security and welfare of building workers at such rate which shall not exceed 2%. So, this cess for the welfare of building workers shall be collected at not more than 2%, but not less than 1% of the cost of construction incurred by the employer. So, this cess will range between 1% and 2%, and this percentage will be calculated on the cost of construction incurred by the employer. So, these can be said to be the important provisions of the draft Social Security Code. Now, after our discussion, these forms your practice question for the day. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. Now, both these questions have been asked by UPSC in the year 2018. First question says, consider the following countries: Australia, Canada, China, India, Japan, and USA. Which of the above are among the free trade partners of ASEAN? In this, Australia, China, India, as well as Japan are the free trading partners of ASEAN. So, here the correct answer is C, that is 1, 3, 4, and 5. Moving on to question number 2, it says, who among the following were the founders of the Hind Mazdoor Sabha established in 1948? In this, the correct answer is D, that is Ashok Mehta, T.S. Ramanujam, and G.G. Mehta. Now, these are your practice question number 3 and practice question number 4. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. Question number 3, it says, consider the following statements about Indian Parliament. First, it was designed by Sir Edwin Lutyens and Sir Herbert Baker. Yes, this is correct. Second, it has elements of both Indian and Roman architecture. Yes, this is also correct. The circular design of the Parliament has been taken from architectures of Mauryan Empire, as it is said to be inspired from a 11th century temple in Madhya Pradesh. So the question was, which of the statements given above are correct? So the correct answer is C, that is 1 and 2 only. Question number 4, it says, consider the following statements about Central Administrative Tribunal. First, it is a constitutional body. Incorrect, as it is a statutory body constituted under the Administrative Tribunals Act of 1985. Second, the proceedings of CAT is not judicial in nature. No, this is again incorrect, as the proceedings of Central Administrative Tribunal is judicial in nature. Third, appeals can be made directly to the Supreme Court from the orders of the tribunal. No, this is incorrect, as appeal has to be made to a division bench of the High Court. So the question is, which of the statements given above are correct? In this, none of the statements are correct. So the correct answer is D, that is none of the above. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.